And we're live with Based, a podcast with Des and Hiram, where we talk about just about anything and everything that might be relevant to human lives. And I give that credit to Carissa, who has this unwavering curiosity for just about everything. We've talked about escorting on this podcast. We've talked about Carissa. We've talked about me. We're going to talk about Danny, who's our special guest today. And I'll let Carissa maybe share some of your thoughts, how you're feeling today. What are we looking at for today's podcast?
Well, I personally like to talk about stigmatized topics and, like oppressed communities and just controversial topics in general, as well as social justice, which is very important to me. And I was very intrigued by this is Danny Cage, and he is a youth in our community that I actually really look up to. He is the district student council student representative and student representative to the board of the PPS Board of Education. He's a youth ambassador to Don't Shoot PDX and an organizer with Sunrise PDX. If you've been following the protests in Portland, you should know who Don't Shoot PDX is. They've been very involved, and they're also involved with Tressa Rayford, right? Right, Danny?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're still in high school, right?
And, yes, I am in high school.
And you're doing big things. You're doing more than a lot of the people that I know who are in their 30s, and you've accomplished so much in your young life. So, and what school do you go to again? What high school?
I go to Grant High School.
Okay, great. And I saw today you posted about going to another school and mentoring there, and you gave talks to students at Woodmere, or is that Woodmere Elementary School? Okay, awesome. And what kind of stuff did you talk about there?
It's both like very like I kind of have a set of like just the concept of civic engagement, but also like it's very like free flow. And like I kind of let the younger kids guide the conversations more often than so.
Very cool.
That's really great, Danny. Danny, it really looks like to me that you are very involved in civic engagement. It's like we all, and when we talk about like civic responsibilities, we're referring to things like voting, like advocating for certain issues, being involved politically, and even just mentally in the discussions that are shaping the world of every individual in this country and around the world. What motivates you? What's your villain origin story? I guess less of a villain, more of a hero in this case, right? But what do you think?
Was it villain to hero, or have you always been a hero?
I don't know. I guess during the Black Lives Matter protest, just seeing all those people, but all this energy. Like I felt like some of those protests I went to, you could like feel it, like not just like see it around you, but like feel
the
it.
energy. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And I believe that like at those type of events or those type of issues that you can feel that type of energy. And that type of energy is like something that I kind of feed off of. And it kind of challenges me to do the work that I do. But yeah, during the Black Lives Matter protest, I was like, I like this. I like what I'm seeing, and I want to continue helping out my community.
Hang on one second. We have a technical difficulty. What is it?
So, Danny and Hiram's audio is echoing.
How do I turn that off?
I was thinking you might have two audio sources in your OBS.
Okay.
Well,
we have Philip here with Halo Space helping me out with sound and
I'm just gonna stay off to the side.
And everything. So he said that you can hear Danny and Hiram's voice double. Is it this one here?
Yeah, but
Can you check it out?
shouldn't mute them entirely.
Well,
I'm not sure.
is it coming from here?
We probably sound terrible right now, Danny. Rip the people whose ears we just
Well,
damaged.
they want to hear you double anyway, so it's probably fine.
We're broke, so we can't compensate you for your hearing loss.
I'm still live, right?
I don't know. Are they talking?
We probably sound terrible right now.
Sounds good now, right?
Oh, that's better.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, we're good.
Like, keep going and we'll double check.
All right. Let me know. Hiram, did you get your video taken care of? I mean, obviously not, but are you working on that still?
Yeah. One more minute. I should have it in less than a minute. I figured out what it was.
Okay. Sorry about that, but yeah, we have the sound better. We were we had a little bit of an echo going on, but go ahead with your question, Hiram, that you were going to ask.
Oh, Danny was just telling us how he found a lot of his inspiration during the Black Lives Matter protests of 2020 that were sparked by the George Floyd incident. And before that, you had Trayvon Martin, which is where, at least for me, I feel I became a lot more engaged politically.
Hiram. Okay. All right. Well, I think what he was saying is that that's when he, after Trayvon Martin was murdered, that's when he became more aware of what was happening, and he that's probably when he got more involved. I was speaking for you.
Oh, did my audio cut out?
Yeah, you were talking about Trayvon Martin.
Yeah, no. So I was saying that I relate to Danny in that aspect where, I started to become more politically aware and involved after I observed other people go out and advocate for these issues. Their motivation and actions really inspired me to get involved. So.
So, when did you become active in the in social justice? You said around you became more involved when the George Floyd protests started up in 2020. Danny?
Yeah. So as the protests started up, Portland also became. I mean, with social justice, I feel like political politics starts to really rise as well. I know the 2020 mayoral race was kind of my first step into the door of politics. I worked on Teresa Rayford's write-in campaign, and that was kind of my first my first kind of intro into the political sector in Portland.
Mm-hmm. And did you have any previous writing education, or was it? You said that you wrote for Teresa Rayford. Were you trained, or I mean, obviously they teach you, how to write in school, in English, but was that something that was new to you, or were you a pretty decent writer to begin with?
Oh, I said write-in.
Write-in.
The writing campaign.
Okay. Got it. So, so that was new to you. You had just started doing that in 2020. For me, when I was your age, when I was in high school, I did not have the guts to do what you're doing. I wasn't even that, social justice wasn't even on my radar. So, it's just amazing to me that you're doing so much in the community. So that's where you got the motivation. Was anybody else in your family involved in activism in Portland?
Yeah. My mom is a teacher, a special education teacher.
Mm-hmm.
She, because of how education is, the current education system, it's very little funds, very little support. And within that, special education gets practically the crumbs left behind. And so that's kind of always seeing her advocate or trying to secure something for her students that was within a system of very little was something that I often watched her. She also took us to Don't Shoot Portland protest, like really readily often since we were little. Like there's a photo.
So they've been doing it
of,
for a while. Don't Shoot has been around for a while. Okay.
Yeah, it's been around over a decade, I believe. And so there's like photos of like us at like 7 years old.
Wow, you're a veteran. You've been doing it longer than I have.
with like signs.
Awesome. Was that exciting for you, or like was it scary at all, or?
I understood I was important, but I also at the same time didn't fully like grasp I was important. Looking back at it, I'm like super happy that I did that.
Mm-hmm.
But there was one time when it like snowed and they did the protest, and I like was dreading it as my feet were like feeling like they were about to like like freeze off.
Oh no. I feel like that's a story that you can tell. You know how like older people will tell the story, like they walked 10 miles in the snow back and forth to school. Like that's your story, which is I think even cooler. They're standing up for something and not just walking to school.
And
hey, Hiram.
so I'm now on camera. So how's it going, guys? Good to see you officially. I wanted to ask you, Danny, as somebody that's, very involved now, and you've been getting more involved as you grow older. What can you tell us about like Gen Z? Are they involved? Do you think the people at your age, care about politics? When I was growing up, I think I grew up in a low-income community, right? So that obstacle in itself makes it really difficult for people to get politically involved. But even then, I had a lot of friends that were like in high school, they were really smart, but at the end of the day, they didn't really care about politics, right? It was grown people stuff, or it was just something that, I don't know. Yeah, is more of Gen Z now involved? Is that mentality changing, or is it you and just a couple buddies? What can you tell us?
I feel like it is. I'm also one person, so I can't speak for everyone, but I think our generation, like I think of all the kids who grew up, like police brutality has always been an issue. I always think of this quote by I think it's like Will Smith, but when he talks about it, it's always been an issue. But for the last like couple of years, it started to be like filmed, and it started to go very like mainstream and stuff like that. And I feel like a lot of these issues are mainstreamed and are readily available for us to see. I also often think about the climate crisis that our generation is experiencing, and it's not something.
It's like, thanks for leaving us with this planet.
And it's like, we can't push it back anymore because we want clean air and breathe.
Yeah, it's
and
really
clean
scary.
Water.
Yeah, it's really scary, and I apologize that we left you with this mess, and my kids with this mess. But yeah, I mean, people like you are standing up and saying like you're not okay with this, and at this point, it's like almost like survival because in 20, 50 years, I wonder what the planet is going to be like. We actually did a climate change episode on our last season. So we talked a little bit about that and how a lot of scientists that I, like my instructors when I went to Eastern Washington University, they were saying that if we don't do something big in the next couple of years, there's going to be a tipping point and things are going to get bad. There's going to be like water wars and shortages of food and everything like that. And so you're involved. Are you involved in an activist group that focuses on climate change? No, that's Sunrise PDX, right? So, and you guys have events that are really cool. Actually, I went to one where there were people like dressed up as like plants and fish and stuff. And so like you really see like, I don't know, like I'm a visual learner, so I love those types of events. Do you organize those types of events in Portland?
I've helped with a few. I kind of, as I've moved I I kind of have started to get overwhelmed with organizing, so I've kind of stepped back
Yeah,
a little bit with
it's a lot of friggin' work.
climate stuff. As I have talked about more recently, the CCRP, the Climate Crisis Response Policy, which I kind of helped craft with Portland Public Schools District. But that's kind of been my main work. That has been mostly other fellow organizers with Sunrise PDX.
Um, Danny, I'm just stuck on this Gen Z topic versus like boomers and stuff. So, we got kind of like not different generations. I feel like
Don't forget the
Carissa,
millennial.
you're a millennial, right? That's what I was going to say. You're a millennial. I think I'm in between Gen Z and millennial, and then you're Gen Z. Because I'm 25. I'm about to be 25 this year. Carissa is somewhere in the vicinity of some
27.
like just before, like at the beginning of the millennial period, and then you're kind of at the beginning of Gen Z. And like me, Des and I grew up in a time where we kind of had our foot in both places, where we grew up without technology, but kind of with it, as we were growing up.
Like, I didn't have a phone until I was 18. Keep going.
Yeah, we didn't have phones. This whole TikTok thing, Facebook, social media. Like, even I'm not that old, but even when I was younger, like, we didn't have that, right? That didn't exist. We kind of I remember I made little papers, like little paper phones, and I would like draw in the keyboard, imagining they were like laptop phones, and like it actually became a thing. In my head, it was kind of like this sci-fi thing that I was just inventing that wouldn't ever exist. But anyway, I say all that because like there's people that are even older than us, right? Like that are like in their 40s, 50s, 60s that grew up before a time where there was even, like TV in some cases, right? I know my mom, she's like pretty young. She's in her 40s and she remembers a time where there was no television. Anyway, so I think now you're seeing like there's a huge difference between generations, right? Because like before this era, we were all kind of at a steady pace of technological advances, right? It wasn't like 10 years, there was all of a sudden all this new technology. This is the first time there's that acceleration. And I think maybe it's causing a disconnect, which is why I want to ask you, like, do you feel like older people are just really disconnected with new trends, technology, ideas, cultural movements? Like, do you find it harder at your age group to communicate with people that are older, even older than me and Des, that didn't grow up with this technology, with this communication?
Or would it make it easier?
Yeah.
I feel like there's both. I know that we've had older folks that have been like, hey, like I haven't gotten an email list from you guys. And
Oh yeah,
we
email.
don't use an email list.
It's better than snail mail. I mean,
I was like, you can find us on Instagram. And some of the older folks are like, I don't have Instagram. Do you have Facebook? And not every young person uses Facebook. I feel like Facebook is more like a millennial thing.
It's hard. That makes
trust me,
like...
it was hard to make the switch to Instagram. I'm still on Facebook. I have have people watching on Facebook right now. Still got love for you, but
that's crazy.
it took a while.
Like Facebook was a hip thing. It was like the Instagram, TikTok. Everybody was on Facebook. You know what I mean? Like Facebook was not the old person thing. The old person thing was like Outlook or like some kind of email app, right?
Yeah, but a lot of my a lot of people who followed, my live streaming and citizen reporting throughout the protests and like my interviews and stuff that I did during that are actually on Facebook. They are the older generation, and I feel like technology, in my opinion and in my situation, has allowed them to feel like they're more a part of what's happening. Like, and people from different countries too were very involved online, at least. Like, I had moderators who made sure that people weren't stalking me and, all that kind of stuff, from like Australia, New Zealand. And they're older. They're like, parents or grandparents. And I feel like social media, Facebook, namely, was a way for them to be more connected too. So do you get that too? I mean, you do the things that you do are a lot different than what I work on. So other than like them using different platforms. Do you
Here-
mainly work with older folks, or do you 'cause like I said, like when I was your age, I wasn't really involved in anything other than like my little school teeny bopper stuff. So so I'd imagine that you work with a lot of older folks.
I work with like a range of people. I mean, a lot of my climate organizing is with younger people, but also I work with the education, and in education is a lot of times with older folks, just because it's usually like 40-year-olds who are school board members.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense.
Um,
You learn, and then you live, and then you teach. Usually that's kind of like the timeline. So that totally makes sense.
I was just going to point out that, at my age, and Danny, you're going to find that you're going to be doing this at you're as a part of your generation at your age. I'm teaching a lot of folks older than me how to communicate with younger generations. And I think it's different than it's ever been before, because before, like I said, technology didn't really change. Like TikTok didn't exist. Everything was really slow and very steady. And so like an adult kind of understood everything for the most part because they've been through it. But adults have never been through technology. They've never been through TikTok. They've never been through, the way that young people now talk to each other. And I find that I'm teaching a lot of adults how to communicate, right? Like I'm teaching them something they've never heard about. And like a lot of adults, they like to think, well, how could you be teaching me something? You're younger than me. But it's just because, like I said, this has just never happened before. People didn't grow up with younger people knowing something they didn't, right? Because things weren't changing the way they are nowadays. And do you find that you do that a lot? That you're working with older folks and you're like, man, they're doing this really wrong, or they don't really get it. Like I know something they don't, and you end up teaching them, or maybe you didn't speak up at that point because maybe you didn't have the opportunity. But do you find that happens to you more often? Or often do you find that you're always kind of like trying to teach older folks how to, come back to earth and talk to, people like your age? And
yeah, it was funny. The other day, they were it was this like government committee, and they were like, "Oh, we lack public input. We lack public comment and stuff like that from community." And so I like went on the page, and I was like, right, like the insert public comment button was like at the very far below, and I was like, right, like something I want as a young person. I want a big red banner that says where to go and an arrow. And so I was like, why don't you like post it on your your Instagram story and just do like a link right there so people would just find it. And they were like, what's an Instagram story? And then show them that.
Yeah, people don't
And
even
then
think about it, but it's such a great tool.
it's
And
crazy
then they're
because
like, you can add links to these things.
Yeah, it's a whole new world.
yeah, and old people don't think that you have something to teach them because again, they didn't grow up with this technology and how fast things are changing. Like they just don't think that it's possible that someone younger can know something they don't. It's kind of a really weird era, and Danny, I'm glad we have you on board because someone like you is going to be at these board meetings, making sure that these older folks are keeping up. It's more important than ever.
Keep them in
before,
line.
my opinion.
Sorry.
Like your role, you might not see it right away, but trust me, dude, like these older guys, they've never lived in a society like we live in today. And you understand it better than they do in a lot of cases. You know how to communicate. You know the tools, how to use them. You know what I mean? And that's why I really appreciate your work. And that's why I was curious, right? Because I knew there had to be a moment where you taught some of these older folks something they had no clue about.
Well, I know that I'm always learning from younger folks. Like I have 3 sisters who are all at least 10 years younger than me, and I'm always like asking them for like Instagram tips or like, am I saying this word correctly? That sort of thing. And I feel like we learn from each other, because I'm more into like the activism world, so I feel like they learn about that kind of stuff from me. And yeah, I really appreciate social media because you are able to like communicate with people of all ages and in so many different ways too. Can you tell us? I'm gonna switch gears here. Can you tell us any projects that you're working on now that you want to put out there and let everybody know about? Anything new and exciting?
Yeah. So right now, with the for the last few, I don't even know how many months, because it's been so many months. I've been working
It's all
on
kind of
the
blending together.
climate crisis response policy in Portland Public Schools. It is a both education and layout of like teaching our kids climate justice, climate change, um, but as well as like getting all of our buses electric, getting our buildings net zero. It's a very big policy.
That's
Portland
awesome.
Mercury called it the boldest policy for a school district to take for climate change in the nation, possibly.
Wow.
Um, and so what we've been doing is we're getting the policy rolling out, but we're creating a charter application for community members. And the committee is basically kind of like a lot of these like government committees. It's assigned to keep the PPS accountable to it, but we're creating the charter application right now. And so in the coming months, any community member and students, which is it has special students positions on this committee, will be available to the public to apply for if they're interested in climate justice, but also holding our district to such a big policy.
Yeah, I mean policy is when I lived in Spokane, Washington. Everything just moves so slowly through city council, but I feel like Portland's a little bit quicker. You know, it still takes hard work, but things definitely move a little quicker than in like rural Washington.
I don't even know where Spokane is.
Yeah, you're not missing it. Okay, I'm not gonna talk bad about it.
You're not missing out.
It has some good
So
good
mean.
things about it too, but I just love Portland,
And
so I'm biased.
I don't know how close we're getting to the 30-minute mark, but I think
Yeah,
I always like
keeping
to ask towards the end of
I
our
got
interviews
something
and podcasts. What are your plans, Danny? Especially someone in your position where you kind of you might not see it right now, but you literally have so much ahead of you. I feel like you might feel like you've done a lot, but your capabilities to do even more are about to rise exponentially. Once you get to college, you're going to have a lot more freedom, and you're going to find that if you really work hard, you're going to find the resources to do even bigger and more significant movements, wherever you get involved. But I think I see your motivation. I think you're going to continue to create change. Now, my question is, how do you think you're going to continue to create change, and how do you think you want to transform the way that people are creating change, right? Like, do you plan to do something different do you have any new ideas about how to get people involved? Is there anything in your future that you're thinking about developing between now and when you get older and when you have more resources and time, right? Because maybe right now you don't have the time, but when you do have the time and the money, what new changes do you expect to make?
Yeah, I think that what I envision is bringing my sort of like beliefs and political beliefs into any realm that I'm in. As an abolitionist, as an anti-capitalist, as a leftist, um, into those areas. I actually think that I've been successful at what I've done because of my belief styles and because, in my opinion, they work um, in these spaces. And right, like, what is it like? Even with I'll give an example, like the climate policy. Not using the word environmentalism and using the word climate justice, because those two things mean different things. Like environmentalism is something that is a very progressive, liberal word, versus climate justice acknowledges the fact that there are harm doings in our society that we need to fix and address.
Yeah, environmentalism just sounds so pretty. So I'm glad that
It gives
we're
me like deer running across like the field.
exactly, and it really is a crisis, and we do, especially the younger generation, does need to get justice for what people from prior generations have done to the climate. So definitely agree with you there. Back when I was in, just like really quick, when I was in third grade, I remember there was like a huge thing about saving the rainforests, and that was huge. So, and you know, I appreciate that because it got me thinking about climate change and all of that. So I definitely think that the move is to work within schools, like talk to the younger generations, even, you know, kids that are younger than you, because you know, it really gets the ball rolling, and like when they're adults, they, you know, they'll have more knowledge about this, and they'll at least, you know, have some knowledge and understanding of how, you know, climate justice, and you know, how things are changing and all that. So props to
And
you.
it's really great to share with the kids. Like I think a lot of times we underestimate the kids. They're like, I went to these fifth graders and they had outstanding questions. Like these kids asked me about like education reform. Like fifth graders
Yeah,
asked
it's
me
just
about
like so
education
raw. Yeah,
reform,
such raw questions.
climate climate
Yeah.
stuff. They wanted to talk to me about like the LGBTQ like bans happening in Florida and like Texas,
I want to talk to you about that
abortion
too, but
rights,
we don't have enough time
all
because
of
you're just
it.
like doing so many
Let
things.
me
Like,
let me let me tell you,
trying to like
Danny,
focus on a couple things.
all of that is like new to everybody.
Hmm.
These fifth graders, everybody in the world is getting exposed to more information at a faster pace than ever before. And I sound like that. I don't know. I sound like a broken radio, but I swear to God, it hit me as I was growing up that like there was a very obvious shift. We went from literally not having computers and doing everything on these old overhead projectors and like talking to each other on landlines. So like Snapchatting, sending emotes, pictures, videos, everything all the time. Everybody's connected.
And even
And these
playing
fifth
like a
graders,
live video.
and look, you know what? Back then, and it's gonna sound a little ridiculous, but like back then, if you ran it as a kid, if you ran into porn, it was because like somebody had a magazine, you know, because something happened, but it was like really rare. And now any fifth grader with a smartphone, you know, who's smart enough to work a smartphone can access information that back then was like extremely restricted. Now, I'm using that as an extreme example, but imagine, you know, what that means for every other kind of information, including, you know, things of like climate justice, complicated political issues, you know, complicated political figures. Now, accessing the minds of fifth graders who now have questions about the world around them. And I'm telling you, man, that didn't exist because we're all really dumb. Because back then, we didn't know what people didn't want to tell us. We didn't know. There was no way. There was no like going
Hmm.
on the internet looking. No, if somebody didn't want us to know, we weren't going to know, right? And now fifth graders know things that even we can't control it right anymore. Like everybody has everything on TikTok, on this, on that. Like, you know, it's getting harder to restrict information. So these little kids are getting smarter. They're getting so much smarter than the little kids I grew up with. Let me tell you, we're all really dumb back then. Not dumb, but we're just like nobody
We
told
got
us
all our
any of
info
this
from
until we were older.
textbooks, and they're not always correct.
Yeah, it was
There's
crazy.
textbooks that were 20 years old.
Yeah, when we were reading them, they were like 50 years old. So, yeah,
Ours, when I grew up, were from the 80s.
yeah, mine too. So they're probably this. We probably read the same
We're
ones.
about the same one.
And now we're like, yeah, and now we're unlearning everything. Like I know the past couple of years, I feel like I kind of just like burned down all of what I knew, like in the not the whole life that I had, but you know, metaphorically, like all of my beliefs and everything. Like I just started fresh, and I was like, you know what, these textbooks are lies. What I knew about the justice system, what I was at least raised to believe, is all wrong. So yeah, and there's just so much information out there, and you know, you got to watch out for fake news and all of that stuff too. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's I'm glad that you're
I
going there.
remember.
What's that?
I remember seeing. I remember like. Because like even when I was young, I was never a fan of police. Like I just like looked at them and I was like, eh. Um, but like I remember like once the Black Lives Matter protest happening in the summer of 2020, and all the information coming out about how like police don't protect us, the rate that they actually solve crime, which is like very low. Like all this data started coming out, right? I saw a lot of ACLU stuff all over the time.
Where'd you get that data?
From like Instagram and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
And like
we do our fact checking.
Wait, these police aren't that good. I mean, I didn't like them, but I was like, man, I hate them now.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, when you're growing up, you're like, raised to think that they're our heroes, and you watch Cops, Bad Boys, Bad. If you ever, my parents always
we had
watched
police
that.
come to in our schools.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
cool.
we did too. Yep. But we're learning that cops are only human, and they make a lot of mistakes too.
Yeah. And now everybody knows, because now the only information coming out is not just from textbooks, but Instagram, social media, Facebook. And so, Danny, we appreciate you so much. Even just jumping on like a podcast like this, it makes a huge difference. And, getting information out there for us in a lot of cases, in all honesty, it's information that gets to older folks, right? Because our audience tends to be older. They tend to be like 40, in their 30s, not really like the 18 and below people in high school, right? Those folks are somewhere else, like on Instagram. But yeah, people hear you speak, especially older folks, and they're like, wow, I never thought about it that way, because I didn't grow up in the world that you're growing up right now.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you, for taking the time really to talk to us about how you learned about, political justice, about how that motivated you to become an activist yourself, got you involved in things like Sunrise ATX. We have a Sunrise here, but Sunrise in Portland, and other, organizations like that, where you're constantly advocating for, community voices and change.
Yeah, definitely. We appreciate you here, taking time out of your busy schedule of activism and going to school full time. Just like putting that information out on Instagram. I see you out there. I see you doing your thing, and I think that's awesome. Like getting other people in your age group, bringing knowledge to them is really important, and I think you're doing great work. Do you have any other anything else that you want to talk about before we close out, Danny?
No, not really. I'm just really happy to have talked to you guys.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah,
really happy
and keep up the work, Danny. You have so much ahead of you, and I'm telling you, somebody that at your age was really motivated to become an activist, right? And I've done a lot of activism in my time, and every year I get to do something bigger and something better, and that experience. Just keep getting that experience. Keep getting yourself involved. For me, it's really important to tell the youth that you know a lot more than you think, and sometimes a lot more than older folks. Don't let this age gap intimidate you, because now I think even more than before, like there's a bigger disconnect between older generations and younger generations. But keep inspiring folks your age to stand up and to speak up, even if they're younger. Even if they're not as experienced as some of these 40-year-olds, because the fact of the matter is, like I mentioned, we live in a new world, and you are an expert in this new world. You grew up in it, right? We didn't. We're having to unlearn things. Like for people that are older, it's a process, because they have to unlearn something first before they can learn something new. It's not like, you could just learn two things at once, especially if they're contradictory. You know what I mean? Learning to live in the new world takes a lot of time, and that time you skipped because you've grown up here from the get-go, right? So you kind of had that head start, and keep that in mind. Keep in mind that you have that head start. I really appreciate your voice, especially because of that, because I think we're in a really unique era.
Mm-hmm.
So just keep it up, man.
And don't let boomers bring you down.
Never.
My friends who are in their I even have friends who are 70, who are, hardcore activists and understanding of all of the new information that's coming out about climate justice and social justice and all that. So, but yeah, don't let the, people stuck in their ways bring you down. Like, keep doing your thing. Thank you so much for being on our show.
Thank you.
All right, everybody.
Have a great one.
This was another episode of Based with Des and Hiram with our special guest, Danny Cage from Portland. Have a great night, everybody. Peace, love, donuts.
Have a great night. Peace, love.